All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us here. Today is January 6th, and this is the Atlanta FileMaker Developers Group. And our presenter today is Susan Fennema from Beyond the Chaos. Thank you very much for volunteering to present.
Well, hello, everyone, and thank you very much, David, for inviting me.
Yes. So, please take it away. You're going to tell us about project
I'm going to
management,
tell
right?
you
Yeah.
about I'm going to tell you about that, but essentially, it's going to be 3 ways to control chaos in your business. And normally, I present this. I want to ask, how many of you are business owners? And I guess I need a yay or a nay because I actually can't see while I'm presenting.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Most of you are business owners. Okay, great. So this is going to very much apply to you. What Beyond the Chaos does is help overwhelmed small business owners simplify their operations and manage their projects so they can focus on growing their businesses and getting their lives back. Small business is really our jam, and we love it. So let me jump in here. First, let me give you, I don't think I know most of you, so I wanted to run down a little bit of who I am so you know what my background is. I am a former FBA member. I was a reseller, and I'm a former project manager for a platinum partner. So I'm very familiar with the FileMaker world. I have been a speaker at DevCon with on-demand sessions at Engage 2020 as well. Those are available out on their YouTube channel if you want to check those out. I was the director of operations at an ad agency for 10 years in Chicago. I've mostly worked directly for small business owners, though, until I started my own business. I am the daughter, sister, and best friend of entrepreneurs. So it kind of runs in my family. By the time I got ready to start my business, they all pretty much were saying, yeah, it's about time, which I know is not the usual experience. Most small business owners get a little pushback from people going, are you sure that's what you want to do? So I've been lucky to have that support. I love technology and I love structure. And if I can apply structure to fun things like being a home chef, it even astronomically makes it better for me. So if you can imagine serving a 7-course meal for 12 people in a 1-bedroom condo, like I did in Chicago, if you think structure and project management don't apply to that, well, you're wrong. It takes a lot of effort. So I want to invite you as we go through here. If I touch on something that you want to interrupt and talk about, that's absolutely fine. I might push questions off until the end if it's one that might take a long time to answer, but I'm absolutely happy to take interruptions. So please don't feel like you can't do that. First thing I want to chat about here is what actually is chaos in business. I mean, I think these pictures sometimes, reflect how we feel as small businesses, but really as small business owners, but really, think about it from the standpoint of, are you struggling with finishing your projects? Are there problems managing scope or budget with your projects? From an operational perspective, do you get pulled in multiple directions and not know what to work on next? What about wondering about a better way to keep things organized? Sometimes this feels like all your clients are mad at you or frustrated. And, the bottom line just comes down to, do you feel like your business is running you, or are you really in control and running it? So this is going to give you 3 methods, at least, probably some other tips along the way of how to get rid of some of these feelings. Now, when we look at this, the first thing I want you to know is that all small businesses have these same challenges. If you're feeling this way, you are not alone. And it is not only software developers, it is across the board. So be comforted in the fact that this is normal, but we want to get you to where you're feeling better. One of the things I always talk about is adding structure, but many small business owners fear that they feel like they're adding bureaucracy, and that's not what we're talking about here. We want to add structure so that it sets you free to do things. It's not adding a whole bunch of bureaucracy. So think about it from that standpoint too. We want to set you free through structure. There are 3 ways that we look at doing that, and our method is to systemize. So we'll go into that in detail, to develop project management skills, and to manage interruptions better in your day. So let's jump into systemization. So with systemizing, the first thing that comes up is, well, when do you really need a system? The first thing, absolutely, to repeat your successes. When you've done something right and you want to do it right again, if you do it the same way, you're likely to get the same outcome. So that's when we want to write a process or a checklist, a template, to repeat those steps in that order so that you can repeat that success. Same thing on reinventing the wheel. Think about all those things that you want to do consistently, but you don't do very often. In your cases, installing FileMaker Server is a perfect example. I run into so many people that they're like, oh, I'm the only one here that can install FileMaker Server. Okay, well, let's put a checklist together so that the business owner is not the one always doing that other people on the team can help out with it. So that's a perfect example, but there are other things like onboarding new subcontractors, those types of things. You don't do them every day, so it's hard to remember the steps. So that's another example. Here's a big one: to start delegating. This is when you really start to be able to set yourself free. And when you're able to do that, you can start working on your business and rather than in it. So that's a huge part of delegation. And when I'm talking delegation, I'm not just talking development. I'm talking about hiring an assistant to help you with little tasks, maybe hiring a marketing person to help you with social media, a bookkeeper to help you with your books. But a lot of us feel like, oh, how would I even give it to them? How would I even tell them what to do? And then, do I trust them to do it the way I want it done? Well, creating that system and that process is the way to make sure that it does. So that is one of the big reasons to create a system. And the other one, this is one that we don't always think about until we're getting older in our career, but the long-term business value. So if you have processes surrounding how your business runs so that a potential buyer of your business could actually see how they could step into your shoes and repeat your successes, now you've increased your business value. Otherwise, at the end, all you have is a client list, which is not as valuable as a way to show a potential new owner how they can continue to serve your clients, to keep the clients with them. So that long-term business value is a big important thing, especially as you're getting older in your career or closer. I shouldn't even say that. Many people are retiring early these days. So as you're getting closer to retirement. So here are some suggested processes. I encourage you doing these regardless of, even if it's just you, put these processes in place. One is sales. How do you follow up? How do you make sure you're staying in touch? When do you do a proposal? Always follow the same steps in the same order. And that almost becomes part of your branding. It's how the world sees you in your sales. Another, invoicing and getting paid. How do you handle invoicing your clients, and how do you handle getting paid from them? Do you have rules about if they don't pay, we stop work? Those types of things. Another is running payroll or paying your subs. making sure you're doing that regularly and correctly. This is something that you could absolutely hand off to a bookkeeper too. So if you develop that process clearly, a bookkeeper can help. A project manager can even help collect invoices from subs, compare them against timesheets, and then push them into the payment method, however you have that set up. Opening projects for sure should be a process that you have in place. And closing projects. I think that's one that we often let go, but how are you making sure that you're staying in touch with the client after you've worked with them? Are you asking them for feedback? Have you asked them for a testimonial? Any of those things. So that can be part of your closing project in your projects. In your case too, it might be archiving things off servers, cleaning up things. Maybe it's taking screenshots for portfolios, that kind of thing. One of the things about processes, all of these things are big things on the whole. But if you think about just taking them down to those little steps that make it up, now you're getting to the right, you're making things happen. Brad Stanford, who many of you might know, he is a FileMaker developer. I worked with him a while back. And as we were going through all this, it just clicked to him. And he said, the way to accomplish a big thing is to do all the little things that make it up. So that's what we're talking about here, is just putting all those little things into a repeatable process. Now, of course, software might have an influence on this. It can drive your process or at least influence what you're doing. I know you're developers, and I know you're often tempted to go and create your own tool to perform these functions. I'm gonna advise against that. Spend your time building things for other people, and all of the standard things that I'm about to share with you, there are tools that will do it for you just fine without you having to reinvent the wheel there. So think about, what CRM are you using? We use HubSpot and a combination with ActiveCampaign. So that's our CRM, and it does influence how we do things. It influences how we move through our sales process because of the way that the tool works. How do you manage your finances? We use QuickBooks, and we do timesheets in our project management software, which is the next one, Teamwork. So those two combine for us. You might do it differently, but of course we have to have that process of how do we pull timesheets out of Teamwork? How do we actually, pay our contractors that way? So
we started using that on your recommendation. It's been great.
Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, it really does help. What do you use for timesheets? David and I are using Teamwork, but Harvest is a great tool. There are other timesheet programs. So that can influence how you're writing your processes. Where do you store your client data? Are you putting it on Google Drive? Are you using a SharePoint server? Where are you storing it? Where is the main source? That definitely influences things. And lastly, how do you manage client support? I know we've worked with David on getting that support set up in Teamwork, but there are tools like Freshdesk or even Teamwork Desk where you can email. It's much more straightforward support, though, than it is project management. So make sure you're separating those two things. They're not the same thing. So, collect all these things, write them down, document them. I recommend you store them in something like in your project management tool, in an operations project that your whole team will have access to. That allows everyone to see the process and be able to know where to go to look for them. The important thing to remember is that these are living, breathing documents. Systems should absolutely grow as you grow. If they are always the same, then something isn't probably right. If you're not changing software, or if you're not learning something and adding it to the process, that gets stale pretty quickly. So they are meant to evolve as you learn things. The other is, input from your team on what's working and what isn't. This also helps with adoption. So, for example, when I first put up a checklist that I want my VA to follow, I'm very interested to hear from her. Oh, Susan, I don't know what you mean here. Great. Let's figure out what I mean here. Let's clean that up, and then let's update that template so the next time we need to use that template, all those questions are answered. So as you're getting that input, you're going to be able to evolve and grow and clarify, which is very helpful. And of course, different people read things different ways, right? So you might have one person that totally gets it, but the next person doesn't get it. Well, the more that you streamline and clarify, the more people are going to be able to follow it.
We've spoken with clients about that too, about their documentation. We've had some people that have been like, "Oh, we want to save all this as PDFs and put this in one spot where, that'll be the final document, and it'll be there forever." And we've definitely talked with people about the same thing. We're like, "No, you have to keep these things updated. It's going to change. You can't just make a PDF and that's it."
I think some people are nervous that, oh, well, what if I just put a Word doc out there, then someone might change it. Okay, well, that is possible. So keep a master copy. But the alternative too is, if you're using, for example, Teamwork, the notebooks is where I store processes. It shows you the versions. Google Drive, if you're going to store them there, it will also show you versions. So you can lock documents too, I think.
We've set up wikis for people as well that can only be internal company wikis that keep track of all those versions and shows who made changes on when, and then you can see all the version history. But it also, you allow different people access to different sections and encourage everyone to contribute to that too.
Right, and that's what you want. Shoot, I'd much rather tell my VA to go update the template than me go do it. So,
that's another big win, right? Delegation.
If you can right. If you can delegate that part, that's even better. And if you have the right team members, they're not going to go be, doing crazy stuff anyway. So they're going to ask. And that can actually be one of your policies. Make a policy that says you cannot change a policy or a procedure or a process without asking us first. And to that point, someone needs to be designated as the keeper of the systems, a process champion. In my company, it's me, but that kind of makes sense because it's what I do. I don't know that it makes sense that that's the case in most small businesses, that the owner is that person. It could be a project manager, an operational lead, someone that's detail oriented. It could be your virtual assistant as well. One of the things that you want to do is to review those systems annually, usually during the least busy part of your year. I like to do it that last week of the year, so I did some of that last week. But making sure that you're going back through and, oh yeah, are we still using that software? Those kinds of things. That's important to do. And that keeper needs to be the one who is responsible for maintaining those. If you're growing quickly, you should be reviewing these systems quarterly. And if you're using a project management tool, which is our next section, you can set yourself a reminder that repeats every quarter to go in and check those, or annually or semi-annually, however you decide. So let's talk about project management. Now, this is the second area or second way to gain a little bit of control and remove a little chaos from your business. First, let's talk about project management tools. And I'm not going to list, well, I will list, but that's not the point of this slide, is to list a bunch of software to go out and use. These tools are sometimes actions. So Let's start with the very first one. Please repeat after me. Email is not a project management tool. If you are managing your projects through email and storing everything in folders in your email and going back and forth with clients in your email, you are not managing projects. You are creating a bunch of email chains. So there are tools that can do this. And once you start using these tools, you will be able to use this instead of email, although almost all of them also work with email. So if you're working with a client who prefers to work through email, that's great. You just send it through the tool instead. I recommend Teamwork. I know David also loves Teamwork. Teamwork is my favorite by far. Monday.com is also good. That is one I'm actually not that familiar with, but I hear a lot of people love it. Asana, we are a partner for Asana too, something I've used, very simple and straightforward, as is Basecamp. If you're just starting with a tool, I recommend one of those two because they are more simple than Teamwork. And once you're ready to have more, both Asana and Basecamp can be imported into Teamwork, so you don't lose anything, no history or anything like that. But no matter what, Trello, whatever you're choosing, you need a software tool to add that structure to your projects. The other thing, now this is not an actual software tool, but regularly scheduled status meetings. That is a tool we use all the time to make sure that things are staying on track. When you have to go talk to a client every week, you're much more motivated to meet the deadlines that you told them you would meet last week. So there's some of that. The other is it's an opportunity to get with them and make them feel comfortable with progress. Do a little show and tell, tell them where you are on budget. That's always something that you want to put in a status meeting, and make sure that they know what's coming next and what you need from them. It doesn't have to be long. You could even do it in 15 minutes if you knock it out fast. You probably can't do the show and tell part, but if you're just knocking down the what, or knocking out the what happened, what's next, and what's going on with the budget, and are there any blockers, you could probably do that in 15 minutes. I recommend that if you're doing status meetings, you have as many of the players involved as you can. That can be an expensive meeting if you have a lot of team members involved. But having everybody that one time a week or one time every 2 weeks connecting is really important. The side effect of that is that it's going to prevent interruptions as well, because your client is going to know the next time that they're going to talk to you, and they're going to feel more comfortable in where they already are. So we're going to get to some interruption stuff here in a minute, but that's a big one that will help with that. And this is not often thought of as a project management tool, but it absolutely is. Your proposal. The whole thing starts there. So if you have not clearly defined your scope, budget, and time frame in your proposal, you're setting your whole project up to fail, because it's virtually impossible to meet expectations. Now, if your proposal is a discovery proposal and then you do, agile type planning from there, that's fine too. But you still have a deliverable in discovery, and you still have a target that your date that you're trying to hit, and they're still paying you for it. So that even counts. But that proposal is really important to set the tone of how you're going to be working with the client and how you're going to be managing that project to success. So let's talk about a few project management tips if you're using one of the softwares that I mentioned. First, each client needs its own project. And some clients might need more than one project if they're very, separated things, but minimally each client should have its own project. Any to-dos or tasks need to have dates and deadlines assigned to them. That's how you make something happen. Schedule the whole thing. If you just have a list of to-dos with no dates, you're kind of putting a dream out there. This is a hope that one day we finish it. If you actually schedule it, you're going to be able to drive that project through. So the dates and deadlines are very important on those tasks. And then, of course, who's responsible for it? Because again, if you have dates and no one knows who's doing what, it doesn't help. So all of these tools will allow you to do those things. Milestones are something that you can set in teamwork, but it could also be something that you set as a big to-do or task in some of these other tools. And that is something bigger. And so if you have a whole bunch of little bitty tasks that you need to take care of to deliver one thing, that might be a milestone. And so maybe you don't need deadlines for each of those itty bitty tasks, but you do need a milestone date. So that's a place where there's a little flexibility depending on how you're managing your project. I'm going to encourage you that if you haven't done this before, get some help to build the structure or the templates in your tools. I work with a lot of small business owners that come to me and say, oh, my software tool doesn't work. Basecamp doesn't work. Asana doesn't work. Okay, well, it does. They do. They work for a lot of people. And I always bring up the metaphor of, if you have a hammer and a nail, your picture's not magically hung. You have to measure where the picture goes. You have to make sure there's a backer on the picture. You have to hammer the nail in the wall and then hang the picture. These tools are the same way. You have to use them properly. And that structure needs to be set up of how you use your tool so that your whole team is on the same page of doing it the same way every time. And these tools are flexible. So being able to, be clear of when do we use a board versus when do we use a task list, for example, that would apply to Asana or Teamwork. Those types of things could be important. So get some help to set that structure up. I mean, obviously we can help, but it can be anybody. It can be a project manager on your team. It could be a spouse who's very detail oriented that wants, to help create that structure, but get somebody who's very comfortable with that. I know a lot of small business owners are more big picture, not that interested in the details, want to create and move to the next thing. So you want somebody who is more structured to help you with that. The next part of project management that's so important is setting client expectations. And I'm going to go back to the proposal a little bit with this. And so if you set good expectations in the proposal, the next thing that comes in is how we manage it through there. So through the project. So the scope is the scope. We've defined it. We've agreed with the client that this is what they need and this is what we're making. Your timeline is based on that scope. You knew what you were going to deliver and you created a timeline based on what that scope was. Changes affect your price because it affects the timeline and it affects the scope, which therefore has to affect the price. So these are cut and dried facts. They're not emotional. And I think that's, some issues we get into with change with clients is it feels emotional. And ways to prevent that emotion are to have clear communication with consequences to your clients. And that doesn't need to be mean. It can simply be something like, hey, Sally, I need that logo from you by Friday, or else we're not going to be able to start on this Monday. And you might even make sure you're reiterating to them that, if we can't start on Monday, Jeff, who's working on your project, I'm going to have to put him on something else. And then I don't know when he's going to be back available. So this might not just delay it the number of days that we don't get your logo. It might delay it for a month. And as long as you're communicating clearly, politely, positively with your client, they can then decide. I think a lot of times we forget that they have a whole other job. As FileMaker developers, you're creating something for them that helps them do their job. So it is not their job to make FileMaker. That's what we do, right? So making sure that you give them that consequence. Maybe the client says, I have so much going on, it doesn't matter. There is no way I can get that logo to you on Friday. But also, if you set that deadline and are clear, they might tell you in advance. So that clear communication is imperative. And give your clients a way to dream. I like to add a wish list to projects so that when a client comes up and says, oh, I have a great idea, you can say, that is a great idea. Let's do it later. So let's talk a little bit about changes, because that's where all this leads to, right? Has anyone ever had a project that did not have a change or a request for change on it?
Probably not.
Yeah.
Probably not many requests. Always many requests.
Right. So the one thing that's important, David, and you said something that differentiates it a lot. A request doesn't necessarily equal a change. It's all about how you're managing it, right? So if they're requesting it, doesn't mean you have to do it. I know as software developers, you're always like, oh, but I can. Okay, yeah, you can, but you also want to get paid for it. And you also want to make sure that all your other clients are serviced as well properly. So number one thing about changes is don't let them get you off track. An undelivered project, it has absolutely no value to the client. And as a service professional, it's really your obligation to keep that client held to the original scope, to keep them on schedule so that value can be delivered. So that wish list I'm talking about can come into play there. Fulfill your scope first and then address the changes. The difference might be.
Let me tell you. I don't know about David, but so many times when I am dealing with a client, so many times they don't really know exactly what they want. So to be able to come up with the pricing structure for something that is just not a requirement, the changes that they sometimes they require or they want, they are really humongous, because sometimes they don't have a very defined, they don't know exactly what they want. And according to what the project goes, they make some, radical changes, So it's a little bit.
Yes, you're correct. And I think everybody's had that experience.
Yeah.
What's important is to make sure that you're keeping it within the scope, timeline, and budget that you've established. So no matter what the client does or doesn't want, you have to start with some sort of a plan. And that plan, and that plan is what you've built your timeline and your budget for. So if the client is changing their minds or doesn't know what they need, then that's when you have to stop and make a new plan. And so that can either be handled in the case you're describing with that type of client. It might be better to go to an agile method of development where you're saying, okay, let's spend 20 hours of budget, and these are the things that we'll tackle this week with those 20 hours. So you're still looking at time and budget and scope.
Exactly.
You're just making it shorter. Yeah. So that's a way to handle that. But with where you have a clear direction of this is the tool you've asked me to create for you, and they come in with a great idea, and it could be a brilliant idea. If you're still at the point that you can deliver what you talked about first, and that can be added on later, then absolutely fulfill what you're already doing and address the change later. And if you're using the wish list, that totally gives you the easy way to handle that, because you just say to the client, that is a great idea. Let's put it on our wish list. and let's talk about it after we finish what we initially planned. If there is a dramatic change, like what you're talking about, where they see it and they're like, I don't like any of it. Okay, well, that's when you stop. You have to stop and talk about those dramatic changes. And you have to be clear of what the consequences are to them of what those changes are. That's really an important thing to note. If you're developing something for a company and then that company ends up getting purchased by a different company, oh, that might be a huge dramatic change. You have to stop and redo the whole thing, So yeah. Those are things to stop and talk about. And maybe you need a new proposal, or maybe you just need a change order or something like that. But if those come to light, it needs to be communicated how it's going to be handled. The last thing you want to do is surprise your client. By doing what they said and then sending them a bill, and then they say, what is this? And you're like, well, you asked. Okay. Yeah, but they didn't know. They don't understand the consequences of what they're asking for. So you just have to be very clear of what that is and let they can drive it if you want. But your goal has to be to get them something they can use. I once talked to a developer who had been working on the same thing for 4 years. They had delivered nothing because the client kept changing direction and all that. And that requires a coming to Jesus, so to speak, with the client to say, look, we can develop forever. I mean, we can always add and change, but we have to get you something that you can start using. I was actually quite surprised that a client would let development go on for that long without requiring some sort of proof of life, so to speak, in the software. But it happens a lot. So all of that is something to keep in your mind. I could do 2 hours on how to manage changes. So if you ever want to, hit me up, we can have a whole other conversation on that. The other thing when it comes to changes is considering issues beyond your control. Like, for example, when a hurricane hits or COVID, any of those things that come up, it does affect things with the client. Be empathetic to the situation and take those into consideration when you're adapting the timeline and the budget and all that. It doesn't mean you don't. It just means, maybe you're not as harsh about it as you would be with just somebody who ghosted you for a month and a half. So think about those things. The beauty of creating this wish list, your next project is totally built off the wish list. Now you have a list of things that you need to do, and you have a whole new project now to work on with the client. You can create change orders based on individual or groups of tasks from that wish list. You can create a change bucket. This is one of the things that it's just money on deposit, so that you say, hey, give us $2,000. And you can ask for anything you want. This is usually in support, by the way, or on a wish list, not on a first project. Give us $2,000. Anytime you ask us for something, we'll give you a quote and we'll take it out of that money on file. What that gives a client is access to you, fast access. You're not resetting the whole relationship and getting back into their server and doing all the paperwork. It's ready to go, so you can react quicker. This is a great long-term support option, are the change bucket ideas. So those are more things to think about as far as changes and wish lists. Some people call them other things, parking lots. There's a lot of phrases for the wish list. So keep the other thing that happens when you go through this wish list is that you'll get to something and people will be like, I have no idea what that even means. What were we talking about? And so some of those things that seem brilliant in the moment might not be necessary after they've started using the software, because the software already accommodates that need because you did a whole discovery and planning process. So, also something to consider.
One thing that's important that we try to always do is when we're writing some of these ideas down or tasks or things to do, we don't just write in the proposed solution for it. We write what the problem is that needs to be solved, and then if we have a proposed solution, we can add that in there as well. But it's not just going to be like, add a button to do this. It'll be like, this person is having trouble entering this data or can't find something. We need to come up with an easier way to access some piece of information. And then say, and here's our proposed solution. We add a button that's going to do these things. And so by having the actual problem on there, it does really help a lot when we come back to those things, a long time later, to say, is this still an issue? And is this still the best way to solve that problem? Because sometimes this problem's still there, but there's a new way to solve it. So,
right. Or what you've created has changed the problem.
Yeah.
Right. Mm-hmm. So that's a brilliant idea to do it that way, so that it's much more clear when you get to it. All right. So let's move on to the next part of project management, which is project managing yourself. Very important to create a project for your business. Not only do we have an operations project for Beyond the Chaos, I even have a personal project where I put tasks for my husband and me in there, because I like to have all of the tasks in one place. You might not have to go that far, but minimally get that project set up for your business. In there, keep the operations tasks with due dates assigned to you and your team. So this could be things like holiday cards that just went out. How many of you do them on time, if you do them? I mean, because you're like, oh, it's December 15th. We haven't done a Christmas card. Okay, well, you probably should have started that probably a month ago. So having something in there that repeats and alerts you is a great example of how to do that. Marketing tasks can go in there, social media post ideas, blogs, all of that can go into an operations project, or even create social media and marketing projects for your own company. So what I'm getting at here is manage your internal projects the same way you're managing client projects. If you put dates to them, if you assign people to them, they're much more likely to get done, as opposed to just having a whole bunch of internal projects that sit there and nobody does anything on them. Another part of blocking out, or another part of project managing yourself, is to block out time on your calendar. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in our next section. And then another thing here is looking at your to-do list at the end of each day versus your calendar for tomorrow. Now, I even recommend end of each week for next week, end of each month for next month, end of next quarter for next quarter. But minimally know what you're going to be doing in the morning before the morning comes. If you spend the first part of your morning figuring out what you're supposed to do today, you're already burning a lot of energy that could be put to accomplishment instead of planning. That planning is easier to do at the end of the day when you're a little bit tired. Use your good brain power for other things, essentially. And while you're doing this, be realistic. This is a big thing that we small business owners have. I'm going to do all 6 things tomorrow and I have 12 meetings. Yeah, okay, come on. So be a lot more realistic and start figuring out what's not going to happen and move it. That's, if you do it in advance, even if it's just a day in advance, it's just a lot more, I guess, professional, especially if you're canceling a call you really could postpone, to let them know then, as opposed to working right through it because you were so busy you weren't paying attention. Those types of things can look bad. So let's get to the third way to control your chaos, and that is to manage your interruptions. There are many ways to do this, but interruptions really can throw you off. And the first thing there is calendaring. This is huge to me. Block time on your calendar for the work you're doing and start with your most important tasks. Thank your God, your family, and your health. These are the most important things in your life. You are not good at your job if you are not taking care of your health. You are not good with your family if you're not attending your functions. You're not good with your God if you're not spending time with Him or on meditation or whatever is good for you or applies to you. But make sure that you put those on the calendar first, because you know that work will always fill the gaps. So make sure that you're getting those things in there first. Then block some time to focus on your business. Now, this is something that can be hard when you first start it. So maybe you can only do it 2 days a week or something like that. It'd be great if you could get 2 hours a day, 5 days a week on your schedule. But if you can't do that, start in small doses and build up. I like to do it between 6:30 and 8:30 in the morning. My brain is fresh. I already know what I'm going to work on when I get there. So I'm not figuring that out when I start. And you just hammer some things out. And it's really, really helpful to block that time. Don't forget to put breaks in your day. You know, the other thing, don't forget to put travel time if you're actually going somewhere. So if your dentist appointment starts at 2, you know, you need a half hour to get there. Make sure that that's on your calendar too, so that you're planning around all of that. The next part of this too is to focus. It's really easier to decide what can wait if you have a plan. It helps you maintain that focus. Eisenhower once said, in preparing for battle, I have always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable. And what he really means about that, I mean, think about what he did. He planned a D-Day, biggest project I've ever heard of. And he had to move it 2 days because of weather. So if you're thinking from that standpoint, all of the planning that he went through helped him make those changes, helped him adapt, because he had to think through everything. And so if he had just said, oh, we need ships here and people there, it would have never worked. So deciding what can wait and what can change is so much easier if you have the plan in the first place. If you become overwhelmed, go back to your list. If you ever feel overwhelmed in your day, take a deep breath, go back and look at your calendar, look at your list, and clear some stuff out. Move it to another day, reschedule it, but reprioritize. That's really going to help you a lot on that. Knock out simple things quickly when it's possible. So if somebody comes and interrupts you, if you get a Slack ping or something like that, if it is something you can answer right away, do it. Get that person moved off your plate. There's a book out called The 1 Minute Manager and His Monkeys, where it's your team keeps coming to you with monkeys and they're trying to leave them in your office. Your job is to send them back out with their own monkeys. So if you can send them back out with their own monkeys quickly, do that.
That's so much nicer than what I was expecting. We had a client and he called his employees his monkeys, and so that was that was not very nice.
Not very nice. No. So yes, they all come in with a monkey on their back, right? You don't want their monkeys. They get to keep their monkeys. So knock those things out quickly. Mitigate bigger interruptions. So if it's something where maybe you need to spend an hour with a developer going through something, don't let that interrupt your plan. Schedule a time on a calendar to do that. Another thing is that if you're an owner there, you can set regular office hours. Hey, if you have development questions, I'm always available between 2 and 3:30 every afternoon. Please feel free to ping me then. Otherwise, set up a meeting with me. And, usually they can see your calendar, or they'll have a Calendly link for you or something to get on your calendar. But make sure that you're not saying, oh, I was going to do all this, but they need this hour of help. Mitigate those bigger interruptions. And speaking of interruptions, what's your most common one? Guarantee you it's email. So one thing that we do with email is that we leave it open all day. It distracts us all day, and it gives us little things that we can take care of and feel successful and empowered because we finished something. Also, email is usually a lot easier to do than the other things that we're doing. So it can be very distracting, and it can be addicting to a degree. Email is just not that important. Schedule when you're going to go through it. If you don't have a VA that can go through it for you, you should be scheduling when to go through it. Now, remember, we've moved all of your projects to a project tool, so there aren't project emails coming through that you need to pay attention to. Sales, you can absolutely handle, but I guarantee you, nobody that is emailing you asking if they can buy something is going to not buy it from you if you take 3 hours to reply to their email. So put that on your schedule of when you're going to go through it. And when you do, decision making is key to go through it quickly. There are only 5 things that you should really be looking at as you're going through emails. 1, respond. It's quick, it's easy. I know what to say. I'm responding and clearing it out. 2, file it. It's something that I need to remember in 3 weeks, something that shipped. This is a perfect example. I ordered something. I got a shipping notice. I want to keep that tracking number. Okay, temporary, right? File it. The next one, junk, it's spam. We all know what that is. If you can unsubscribe, even better. Delete it. Don't be afraid to delete the bad things or the things that are totally not important. Just delete them. And then the other one is flag it. So those flags are the things that might need to go on your schedule, that might need a to-do made for them. Those are the ones that'll be bigger and time intensive. So if it's that, you don't want to do it during that email check. So what you're looking at the end of your email or at the end of your review is an empty inbox. So that gives you less trepidation about checking your email the next time because you know you've limited them. You're not going to have 5,000. You're going to have 10. So look at it that way.
I don't know if 5,000 was supposed to be an exaggeration.
It's
but
not.
I've literally dealt with people who have 5,000 items in their inbox.
Yes, it is not an exaggeration. I have seen that as well, and I can't even look at it. I have to walk away. If you have 5,000 items in your inbox, absolutely declare bankruptcy and start over. There is no way you're going to look at 5,000 emails. So you want that inbox empty. I mean, and that it feels good too, right? You get a little bit of a jolt when you're like, oh, it's all done. So make sure that you're doing that. I will tell you that declaring bankruptcy, if you're an email junkie, can be terrifying. But once you do it, you're going to have this weight lifted off your shoulders. And I guarantee that if it was important, you're going to get another email about it or somebody was copied on it. If there are emails that are so important that you couldn't lose all your emails tomorrow, you need to be storing them a different way. They should be in your tool. They should be printed to a PDF and filed in a client folder or something like that. The emails should not be that important. Another key on this is to schedule your outgoing emails. So I know we business owners work until late at night, right? And we shouldn't be. We know better, but we'll go sit in front of the TV and clear out our emails and respond to everyone. Anyone ever send an email at 11:30 and get a response from a client? And now you're in an email conversation with a client at freaking midnight. It is the worst. So don't do that. All of our tools now, all of your email tools have ways to schedule an outgoing email. So schedule that. So feel free to keep doing your email at 11:30 if you want to, but schedule that email to go out during a regular work schedule. Two things that does. One, it makes the client feel like that you're responding to them fresh and not at 2 a.m. because you just now are so tired, but you just got to it. So, they're getting them in the morning when you're open and it's office hours. The other thing that it does is it sets an expectation that you're not going to work 24/7. And that's really important because you do need your time. So with that said, the 3 ways here, let me summarize them again here, are systemize, create process, manage your projects effectively, and prevent interruptions as best as you can. So that wraps me up. I will offer you guys, I am working on an ebook that's about to be released. It's called 3 Ways to Control Chaos in Your Small Business. It is a lot of what we talked about today, but more details. But it is short, so it's only about 25 pages, so you won't feel overwhelmed, easy to read. And if you'd like to be added to the wait list, please feel free to email me at susan@beyondthechaos.biz, and I will make sure you get it as soon as it is hot off the presses, so to speak.
Okay.
All
set? Is that it?
All set.
We're great. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
You're very welcome. Y'all have any questions or anything? If y'all have any, I'm happy to take them.
No, I think you had some great advice in there. That was really good stuff. I know we worked with you on some project management things a while ago, and you helped us out a lot as well. So yeah, thank you very much for coming and talking in here.
You're very, very welcome, and thank you so much for inviting me. I had a great time.